The shout cut through the restaurant like a sudden storm, sharp enough to freeze forks in midair and silence a room full of powerful people. A billionaire had just risen from his table, his face pale, his hands shaking, demanding to know who had made the simple dish placed before him. For a moment, everyone thought someone was about to be fired. No one imagined that this question would reopen an old wound, uncover a buried truth, and change several lives forever. Before the story goes any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of people who are often overlooked, please take a moment to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them most. The restaurant stood in downtown Chicago, elegant but warm, the kind of place where deals worth millions were signed over dinner. That evening, the room was filled with executives, investors, and journalists, all there for a private charity event hosted by Jonathan Reeves, a self-made billionaire known for his sharp mind and even sharper temper. Jonathan was respected, admired, and feared, but few knew anything about his past beyond headlines about success. To most people, he was untouchable, a man who had climbed to the top alone and stayed there by never looking back. In the kitchen, far from the polished tables and crystal glasses, worked a young waitress named Grace Miller. She was 26, with tired eyes that carried stories she never told and hands rough from years of work. Grace had grown up in a small town in Ohio, raised by a single mother who believed deeply in faith, humility, and hard work. When her mother passed away after a long illness, Grace moved to Chicago with nothing but a suitcase and a quiet determination to survive. She took the first job she could find, starting as a dishwasher, then a prep helper, and finally a waitress who sometimes helped in the kitchen when it was short-staffed. That night, the head chef had fallen ill just hours before service. Panic rippled through the staff, but the manager had no choice but to improvise. Grace stepped in to help prepare a few simple dishes she knew well, recipes passed down from her mother, meals that were never meant to impress critics, but to comfort tired souls. One of those dishes was placed before Jonathan Reeves without anyone thinking twice. It looked modest compared to the other plates, but something about it made Jonathan pause before taking the first bite. The moment the food touched his tongue, the room around him seemed to vanish. The noise faded, the lights blurred, and suddenly he was no longer a billionaire in Chicago. He was a small boy in rural Missouri, sitting at a worn wooden table, watching his mother move gently around a cramped kitchen. He remembered the smell, the warmth, the way she smiled even when life was unbearably hard. He remembered the last time she cooked that exact dish, just weeks before she died, whispering prayers over him when she thought he was asleep. Jonathan had spent decades burying that memory under ambition and success, telling himself that the past no longer mattered. But one bite had torn down the wall he had built so carefully. That was when he stood up and yelled, demanding to know who made the dish, his voice filled not with anger, but with something raw and unguarded. The guests were confused, the staff terrified. Grace felt her knees weaken when the manager pointed her out. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked into the dining room, fully expecting to be blamed or dismissed. She had learned long ago that people like her were easy to replace. As Grace stood there, Jonathan looked at her face, searching for answers he did not yet understand. He asked about the recipe, about where she learned to cook like that, about why it tasted exactly the way he remembered. Grace spoke quietly, explaining that it was her mother's recipe, one she made when money was tight and hope felt thinner than air. She explained that she cooked it whenever she missed her mother, whenever the world felt too heavy. She had no idea that her words were reaching places in Jonathan's heart that had been locked away for decades. Jonathan sat down slowly, his eyes filled with tears he had never allowed himself to shed in public. He shared, for the first time in many years, that his own mother had made the same dish, that she had raised him alone, cleaning houses and praying that her son would have a better life. He admitted that after she died, he threw himself into work, convincing himself that success was the only way to honor her, even as he lost sight of compassion along the way. The room was silent as two strangers realized they were connected by the same simple meal and the same kind of loss. In that moment, the power dynamics faded. Grace was no longer just a waitress, and Jonathan was no longer just a billionaire. They were both children of women who loved deeply and gave everything. Over the following weeks, Jonathan asked Grace to help him recreate some of the meals from his childhood. What began as occasional cooking sessions turned into long conversations about life, faith, and the cost of forgetting where you come from. Jonathan began to change. He treated his employees differently, funded community kitchens, and started a scholarship in his mother's name for young people from struggling families who dreamed of working in hospitality. Grace's life changed too, though not overnight. Jonathan helped her enroll in culinary school, but more importantly, he reminded her that her worth had always existed, even when the world failed to notice. She continued to work hard, guided by the values her mother had taught her, never letting pride replace gratitude. Years later, the restaurant became known not just for fine dining, but for its heart, and Jonathan Reeves, once known only for his wealth, became known for his generosity and humility. All because a simple dish made with love and memory forced him to face the past he had tried so hard to forget. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of someone you've lost or a kindness you once received, please take a moment to like this video, share it, and let us know in the comments how it made you feel. Your engagement helps keep stories like this alive. And before this story ends, we have a special request for you. Please comment the word hope if you believe that even the smallest acts of love can change a life. Sometimes it isn't grand speeches or loud miracles that transform us. Sometimes it's a quiet meal, prepared by unseen hands, that brings us back to who we were meant to be.